they cannot take their family with them. In that way, one can see really vulnerability of migrant workers in the destination places. Let me place before you the policies that are followed by the receiving countries and sending countries. In the case of India, we are a sending country. India is also a sending and a receiving country. India is in a very, very precarious position because India not only sends some workers but also receives workers from Bangladesh and from Nepal and from other countries. So in that way, India is both a destination and a source country. The receiving countries, you take the Gulf countries, you take the Southeast Asian countries, Malaysia, Singapore, all of them, they follow a policy called limiting labor migration. All the laws are for limiting the migration. Every country, limit your migration. Send less number of people. Secondly, limiting the duration of migration. The time that is allowed, the time that is given for a migrant worker to work in a destination country is exactly for a year or two, depending upon the nature of the work and other things. And limiting integration. However good you may be in your work, there is no possibility for integrating yourself with that country or with that community. Not possible. Migrant workers, they cannot, they are forbidden to, in a sense that, a migrant worker, there is no provision for integration. This is another aspect. And then the single male entry, single migration, that I mentioned to you. And marriages are not allowed with the locals. So in that way, lot of restrictions on the side of the sending country, receiving countries. A country like India, which is a sending country, are there policies for us here? Is there a national policy on migration? There is no national policy on migration. Are there laws to govern migration? Yes, there are laws. Which law? The 1922 British passed a law. It has been reenacted in 1983 as the Immigration Act. And the 1983 Act is the one which is governing the fourth phase of the migration, which is a labor intensive. And the Act is not able to respond to the type of migration that it is taking place. They appointed a committee, and the committee examined the 1983 Immigration Act. And they indicated very clearly that now a lot of changes has to be made. And still we are waiting. Except that a new ministry has been created, there is no data. Interesting, you may be asking that is there any data of how many Indian workers are in Gulf? We don't know. Except Kerala. Kerala says that they have 2.2. And others, if you go by the Labour Ministry, the Labour Ministry statistics given by the Gulf countries, UAE, Oman or Bahrain, what they give as a statistics, each one of them they give a figure. More or less it is 6 million Indians who are working in the Gulf region. Why it is not possible to get the number? We don't have any way to get the number of migrants. Passport is issued by the Ministry of External Affairs. Your immigration is given by the Ministry of Home Affairs. And when a worker goes to a destination country, he comes under the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs. None of them are involved in giving statistics of this kind. There is no relationship between the three governments. And we don't have any data of how many Indians are working in foreign countries, in Gulf countries, as under the labor visa, or as irregular migrants, or as undocumented migrants. We don't have any data. So our laws are archaic. And secondly, when you look at the national policy, there is no national policy on migration and the lack of bilateral and multilateral agreements. I'm not denying that there are no bilateral agreements. There are bilateral agreements. But these bilateral agreements, it has to be visited every day, every year. Revisit every year, and you have to enhance the minimum wages and other things. It has to be labor friendly, it has to be right based, and those things are missing in the bilateral and in the multilateral agreements. Here at this point of time, I must tell you that we have a huge number of Indians working in Gulf countries and in the Southeast Asian countries as undocumented workers. People may call it as illegal workers. I don't want to call them illegal because no human being is illegal to be. So they are undocumented workers. They are, they are irregular workers. So many of them in the Gulf region and in the other regions, they work in they work in a large number. They don't come under the purview they don't come under the purview of the government, protection, laws, nothing. They work in the destination country. The moment they get caught, they go to the detention centers, and all the countries are having very big detention centers where they are kept, and nobody knows how many of them are in the detention centers in the destination countries. Now I'm coming to the issues, to place the issues before you on migration. Number one, governance and mobility. Number one, we are talking about two different things: the state rights and individual rights. The individual rights to migrate and the state right to limit the migration. So this is contradiction. So I want to place before you the governance and mobility. And one thing that has come, that is coming out from all the sending countries. You look at Asia. In Asia, all of us are labor-sending countries. Take Philippines, feminization of migrants. Highest number of women are laboring. Migrants, 90% are women in Philippines. Indonesia, 80% are women. Among the South Asian countries, Sri Lanka, feminization of migration. Only South Asian country from where women live in large number to work in Gulf and in the Southeast Asian region, Sri Lanka. Pakistan, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, all of us are labor-sending countries. In Asia, all our countries, we are labor export countries. Except very few countries who are labor receiving countries like Malaysia, Singapore, and in East Asia, Hong Kong and other countries. Now, in this migration, you know very well that from the time I mentioned to you in the beginning how the Kanganis were appointed, Maistri, Sardar, they were the ones who were regulating migration. Things have not changed. Things have not changed. Things are there as it is. Instead of Kangani today, you have an agent in the village who is getting the people who want to migrate to the towns and to the cities. So the same thing, private migrants. So number one, most of them, the labor sending countries, in one of the recent meetings they have asked very clearly that let us regulate the manpower industry. People who are involved in recruiting. Not only in the places in the country of origin, also in the countries of destination. Because a laborer is taken and he is sent and he is received by an agent in the destination country. Both are involved. So in that way, regulate this industry, and even they have suggested a kind of a global level meeting to discuss the problems of the labor, regulate the recruitment industry and regulating the agents involved in the recruitment. Number two, the major concern in migration today are the stranded migrants. People who are in detention places. People who are, as undocumented workers. Large number of undocumented migrants. You would have seen in the newspapers, Kuwait announcing general amnesty program. Malaysia has announced a general amnesty program twice. Right? Then undocumented workers go and then they register name with the Indian embassy, and then they try to come back to our country. Whenever a general amnesty program is announced, you can see the number of Indians who go and register in those countries. Huge number. This is an indicator that more than the number of people who are working with a standard labor contract, we have a huge number of Indian workers who are undocumented, who are irregular, in the irregular condition, right? They are most vulnerable, and that condition is pathetic. So in that way, the standard, all the labor sending countries are asking this, namely you regulate the standard migrants. The third one they are asking is this, namely extend the labor rights to migrant workers. See, if you take a labor and if you go by trade union rights of the laborer, your laborer's rights is a right. Whether he is in India or in Kuwait or in Abu Dhabi or in any other place, So extend the labor rights to also to the migrant workers, to the migrant workers. Let there be a fixed hours of work, let there be a minimum wage, let there be, they can be, the workers should be protected with the health insurance, so on and so forth. That also is being discussed. And the fourth one is about women and women's migration. Particularly, we are living in an age of feminization of migration. Women living in large number, our countries to go and work, elsewhere. See, most of the South Asian countries, they have adopted what is known as, they have restricted the movement of women. In India, there is a law which says that women above 30 only can migrate for domestic work and otherwise. Right? ECNR category, immigration clearance required category, ECR category, not NR category. So this is one thing that has been coming up very clearly, and why there is a cap, why there is a restriction on women's movement and women's right to work and women's right to move outside the country. Nepal has followed. Many of the other Asian countries, they are also putting a cap on women to, those who are willing to go out and to work. Anyway, when most of the women, when they go out for domestic work, the best framework that is available is the ILO Convention on Decent Work for Domestic Workers. Unless our country and other countries, they sign the ILO Convention, your country may not be able to protect the migrant workers. And I told you about the bilateral, multilateral agreements. And I think going by research, papers and all that, what I am trying to tell you is this. Instead of bilateral agreements, multilateral agreements are good. What is emerging now is, if you sit as a South Asian country, labor-sending country, all our countries are labor-sending countries, you negotiate with the Arab countries. You fix minimum wage. Otherwise, there is no minimum wage. When somebody fixes a minimum wage, another country is ready to send for half of it. Less than half of the minimum wage, another country is ready to send its labor. That is how today we don't have we don't have any standard that is being followed as far as the agreements are concerned. And finally, no national legislation. We must have a national legislation. Even people who are working on the area of refugees, what they are telling is, okay, the 1951 Geneva Convention, India is not a signatory. 67 Protocol, India is not a signatory. But you have a national legislation to protect the refugees. In the same way, if there is a national legislation to protect the migrants, then there is nothing like that. Having said that, finally I want to place before you some of the issues and then stop so that we can have a discussion. There is an international convention on migration. This international convention is an excellent international convention. Like you have international convention on women, on children. Like that, there is an international convention on the rights of the migrant workers and their families. Fantastic convention, because this convention protects the migrant worker in the destination country. It protects the family back in the source country. It protects it there. It protects the family here. Excellent. 1990. We are in 2013. 23 years after the International Convention on Migrants. Look at the signatories. How many countries have signed? In our region, Bangladesh has signed, Nepal has signed, Sri Lanka has signed. Other countries are yet to sign. As a labor-sending country, we should not have any problem in signing and ratifying this convention. You stand to benefit because obligations are all on the side of the receiving countries. Obligations are all on the destination countries. There is very less of, you stand to protect your migrant workers. So this is one international instrument. Another interesting fact about this international instrument, this is one international instrument which not only protects the migrant worker, but also undocumented workers, irregular migrants. So this international convention protects both. It doesn't discriminate. And the IOM report, International Office of Migration Organization on Migrants, IOM International, the UN body. If you take the report and read, the report says 195 million people are on the move. And it talks about globalization, mode 4, and how, it says that the globalization has affected, capital can move, people cannot move. We are in that mode now. This is where our capital move, but people, there's a lot of restriction for the movement of the people. Second interesting aspect, the ASEAN countries, 11 countries, in 2007, they have created the ASEAN Declaration for the Protection of Migrant Workers. Look at the way in which people are trying to protect the migrant workers and to ensure their rights. ASEAN countries, 2007, and they are fighting with Malaysia and Singapore. Malaysia and Singapore are not accepting that ASEAN Declaration includes irregular migrants and undocumented migrants. Other countries, Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Philippines, they are all telling Singapore and Malaysia, fine, you are agreeing to, the documented workers. Please also look at the reality. There are so many undocumented and irregular migrants. Please recognize them also. This is another, argument that is coming up. And the ASEAN countries have a better standard to treat migrant workers. SAARC countries are absolutely not anywhere near the ASEAN countries and other countries. There's a Colombo process. 2006, very interesting effort was made. And the effort is this. This is known as Colombo process. Labour sending countries, labour receiving countries sitting together once in 3 years, and then they negotiate. There was a first time it was Colombo, and then Abu Dhabi, and then Bangladesh Declaration. They are going to have another one, where the labour ministries of receiving countries, most of the Gulf countries, and sending countries' labour ministers, they come together and then they negotiate. And at the Abu Dhabi Declaration only, they decided that a migrant, domestic worker who is a lady, she should be given a cell phone, and they should deposit money with the Indian embassy. Like that, many things were made in the, many things were discussed and many things were included in the, Colombo process. This is a new process, that is taking place, and definitely the sending countries, they are stand to benefit by this. Finally, I am coming to this question, friends. When it comes to migration, the debate is about two things: managing migration, protecting migrant workers. Should we manage migration or protect migrants? The human rights groups, civil society groups, they are all for protecting the migrant and migrant workers' rights. And countries are for managing migration. India has received the highest foreign exchange. India, remittances, India tops the list. It was China, Mexico. Mexico was first, China was second, India was third. In the last 5 years, India is first. $60 billion. This is the, remittance that we get. Huge money. Next to exports, what we get is remittances. And please keep in mind that the remittances are not coming from the knowledge workers who are working in America, in Canada, in Australia, or in Europe. This money is a blood money. Every day the migrant worker is sweating out in the extreme heat, hot conditions in the Gulf countries. 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. The PIO or NRI, non-resident Indians and people of Indian origin, they may have their heart for India, but their money is not in India, it is in Swiss francs. But it is a migrant worker who faithfully sends the money back home month after month. And this is what helped India to overcome the present economic crisis. Last time we pledged our gold, this time we did not. because your forex is so good because $60 billion, huge money, number one in receiving remittances. So when countries receive more money, they talk about managing migration. But for migrant worker, he is like a candle burns out. I was told recently I was in Kerala, because Kerala CDS are connected with this migration research, and when they conducted a study with the returnees, the migrant worker was so upset. The reason why he was upset because he returned from Gulf after working for 5 years. After a week or so, the wife asked, "When are you going next? Where are you going next?" He said, "Then I'm upset. After working 5 years in there, with extreme hot heat conditions, and working for 12 years, 14 years, and coming here, sending money, month after money." And another boy in college, he told that, "Have you seen your father?" He said that my father works in a Gulf country. And then he asked, "Have you seen your father?" And this was a question that was put in the, asked by the, those who collected the data. This boy said, "My father is an ATM for me, anytime money for me. Whenever I need money, he sends me money." Right? Once in 3 years, once in 5 years he comes. He is here for 3 months and then he goes back. So this is the condition, and the social cost of migration, if it is taken, I think we will not be able to match the social cost with that of the remittances we receive. Finally, in my opinion, I think this labor migration, it has to be orderly, it has to be protected. Migrant workers needs protection, and towards that, yet whatever the country should do, citizens should do, and civil rights groups should do, they should do. With these words, I thank you for inviting me to speak on labor migration. Related to take questions.